everyone, it's Sharana from Pair of Weights. Today I'm going to be reviewing Succession Season 3, Episode 3, The Disruption, okay? It's a lot of mess happening today with these siblings. So, we see that the episode opens up. We see that Kendall is having a lunch interview, and essentially he's speaking with a reporter. Of course, as usual, Kendall never lets her really get a word out, but when she's actually able to ask him a question, one of the first things that she asks Kendall is, what is the status of your relationship with your siblings with everything that is going on? And so Kendall thinks for a moment, and he just says like, hey, we have little issues amongst us right now, but I'm in a really good headspace right now, and I just really hope that my siblings are in a good headspace as well. And so we see that this headspace becomes a joke with Roman throughout the entire episode when he comes in contact with Shiv, and he's like, hey, how's your headspace? Asking his dad when he sees him, how is your headspace? But you can tell that from last week's episode, when we see that all of his siblings actually said no, they did not want to join his side, that they wanted to stick with their dad through thick or thin for this. You can tell that hurt him a little bit. And so we see that Kendall really goes down this like downward spiral the entire episode. We see that Kendall is surrounding himself with these so-called friends, people who are basically yes people. Some of the closest advisors to them, when they're telling him not to do things like not to go to Sophie's show, it wouldn't be a good idea. He keeps basically not taking their advice, and he's really leading himself to his own downfall. He is almost, even though he thinks that Logan is his worst enemy, in fact, Kendall is Kendall's worst enemy. And so we see that they're playing this good tweet, bad tweet game in the limo. We see him, Greg, his girlfriend. And so essentially they're reading all of these different tweets that are good, that are bad, some people who are on his side. But we see that one of the tweets that gets to him is essentially when they're talking about his mental illness and also to his addiction issues. You can tell that they kind of hit him in a hard spot, even though his friends tried to like beef him back up. Like, it's just a tweet. They were just talking smack. But we see that things get even more a little hairy when we see that he actually ends up going to the same charity event that Shiv is going to be at. When he comes out of the limo and he talks to the press, he says F the patriarchy, as he's still putting on this facade that, Kendall is okay. He feels like he's at the top of his game. And so we see that Kendall, when he sees Shiv, he basically asks her like, hey, how is dad doing? So you still see that no matter how terrible, that Logan has been to his children, they still want to make sure that their dad is okay. That is why the siblings stuck with him at the end of last week's episode, because they were afraid that if they left his side, that not only would he lose the company, that he could potentially die, that something bad would happen to him. And so essentially, Shiv tells him like, hey, he's just worried that you're going to come into the office. He has a shareholders meeting. He has other stuff that he's trying to do. And then basically they kind of come to an agreement, but we see that Kendall breaks that agreement later on in the episode, where he says that he will wait until after the fact. But one of the chilling moments that we see is Shiv and Kendall are having this conversation. In their minds, they truly believe that they are fighting for the truth. They believe that both of their sides are correct in just the ways that each of them go about it. They oppose one another. But when Kendall realizes, he looks at Shiv and he basically just says like, it's you. Like, basically Shiv is now Kendall. Her dad is grooming her to be the one that's going to take over the company. But we saw at the beginning of this series in season 1, we saw that Kendall was supposed to be that person. Then we see where Kendall is now, how all of that really led to a part of his downfall that we saw at the end of season 1 and also going into season 2. But we see that Kendall just gets even more weird. So he's having an after party after they leave the event. And essentially we have Z-Way, who has her own show on Showtime. But we see her, she is Sophie in this week's episode. So she has her own talk show. And essentially she is making fun of Kendall. So much to the point where she basically says that he has Caucasian white brain, that he has grown up so privileged, so rich, that at the end of the day, he thinks that he's being so-called woke, which is what we have been seeing from Kendall, thinking that he's fighting for, these victims, that he's trying to be a voice for the voiceless. And essentially, he's just a woke jackass. And so we see that everyone's like, dang, like she is really dragging you. But Kendall is the only one that can't see that he is the actual butt of the joke, which just makes every single interaction when of him just being delusional as to what the world thinks about him, even though Sophie was telling the truth about him. He thinks that he's woke, but he's really not. And so we see that after he watches her segment, basically he says like, hey, I want to go on her show. I think it'll be really cool. Of course, people who have any type of common sense is basically like, Kendall, no, do not do this. She's going to drag you for filth. They didn't say that, but I mean, that's basically what they were saying. But essentially he doesn't take their advice, and then he decides to set something up. And then Kendall starts feeling himself so much that he decides to go into the office to cause World War III with his father. And so essentially he's going into the office. He has his security filming this just in case if they deny him access, because he is still he's still an employee of Waystar. As we saw the Jerry warn Logan when Logan was just like, I'm going to fire him. If he fires him, this is basically going to signal the DOJ to basically pull out a search warrant to come and subpoena them to take all of their documents, and it's just going to make Logan's mess even messier. And so we see they're recording this. The security is like, hey, you can't come up, and he was like, oh, so you telling me I can't come up? He's like, make sure y'all get this on camera. But Logan's advice is like, no, you can come up, let's go through the freight. And so essentially he causes this entire ruckus just to prove a point that he's not scared to his dad. We see him sending his security off to get a couple of basically a shopping list, which we see later is potentially the speakers that he used to interrupt Shiv's speech now that she is the new president. So we see that he's on the phone with Lisa. He's trying to figure out what's the next blow that he can deal to Logan. And so we see him talking to Lisa on the phone saying, hey, can we get a raid? She's like, we don't have enough information yet to be able to do that. But he's also making sure that he's checking on the status of his own immunity. And so essentially, after security comes in, we see security comes in at Logan's request into Kendall's office. He was like, I know you, I know what you're up to. And he was like, I was like, why is he staring at him so crazy? I guess he was trying to intimidate him. But we see towards the end of the episode, we see that Shiv's way of getting back at Kendall is essentially to write this scathing letter talking about his mental illness, how he's an absentee father, how he is not dedicated to his recovery, almost insinuating that Kendall is still using drugs. And so we see that this really sinks him to an all-time low. He's trying to talk to the writers of Sophie's show to get out of actually participating in the television series, or, hey, can you please just not mention this letter? The girl was like, sir, are you serious? This is gold for our show. This is ratings right now. No, we cannot do that. And essentially she manipulates him into just saying like, hey, this is just comedy. It's going to be okay. But we see eventually that Kendall goes into the computer room as he's watching Sophie's show because he basically dips out on them. And essentially she is dragging him for filth yet again. And we see Kendall, he just sinks himself, and it almost looks as if he was crying. I don't know for sure, but we can tell that, you know, Kendall is kind of getting close to his rock bottom, that this facade that he has put upon himself, that he's being okay, no matter what the press is saying about him, no matter how his family has betrayed him, how his siblings have left him, we now see that that is actually taking a toll on him until he actually is checking his phone and he sees that the FBI has issued a subpoena. They have come to Waystar to grab all of the documents. And so let's talk a little bit about Greg and Tom. So Tom just is harassing Greg this entire episode. We saw from last week that Greg decided that he was going to go with his own attorney and not a Waystar attorney. And so Tom just shows up in his office randomly like, hands up, FBI. And I was just like, sir, can you let Greg just have a moment? My man been stressed out this whole season. It's only been 3 episodes. But then he also tells him he put some mints. He doesn't know it's mints. He put some mints on the table. He was like, hey, this is cyanide. The whole family needs to take it. And then he was like, I'm just kidding. It's just mints. And he was like, no, honestly, take one because your breath stinks. And I was like, Tom, was that necessary right now? And to make matters even worse, to continue the hazing of Greg for not taking the Waystar attorney, and because the family thinks that he has chosen Kendall's side, he now is going to move him into this crazy, dirty, cluttered office. And so he's just being so disrespectful to Greg. I just felt so sorry for Greg, okay? He was already feeling insecure about his wrist. He thought that Kendall was gonna buy him this $40,000 watch. Then after he realized that Kendall was like, sir, who was buying you a $40,000 watch? Where? I don't care how rich I am. Then they peer pressure him into buying the watch that he can't even use. I was just highly confused about all of this. Like, You don't even know how to work a watch, but you spend $40,000 on it because you're trying to fake stunt. I just don't get it. But can we talk about how Tom and Shiv, their marriage is trash. It's like the most trash marriage that I've ever seen. So Tom essentially, as he's trying to talk Greg into like, hey, come to this meeting with me, everyone is trying to assess like the damage and the fallout and where they fall in with everything that's happening with Waystar. And so essentially when we see Shiv comes home from the charity event, she's talking to him and he's like, hey, like, make sure you don't leave the dogs out. You can tell he's drunk. And she's like, what is going on with you? Like, how was your meeting? And then basically the guy tells him that, there's no way that I don't see you going to jail. And so they have this interesting conversation where Tom basically says like, hey, what if I just became the scapegoat? I'm going to be the sacrificial lamb, so your father won't get in trouble. I'll probably do less than a year. Like, it won't be that bad. And so Shiv was just looking at him like, sir, you drunk, because that sounds crazy. And I was like, thank you, Shiv, finally being a good wife. And then what her raggedy behind do? Then this chick gonna go back and be like, you know what? That's a genius idea. I said, Beesh, in what world is your husband going to jail for your raggedy ass father? In what world is that a genius idea? You don't love your husband. You don't deserve time. You need to pack your stuff. You need to go. Okay, just go. Shiv don't care about you. And so essentially, Tom goes to talk to Logan as they're at the studio, and he basically tells him like, hey, I'm willing to give myself up. And so Logan was like, Beesh, are you serious? He didn't say that, but like, that's basically what he was thinking. And so essentially he was just like, so what do you want? And he was like, nothing. And I was like, Beesh, so you just gonna give yourself up willy-nilly just to be like, hey, father-in-law, like I'm just doing a good deed? I was just like, why are you so dumb? So Logan is just like, hey, thank you, I appreciate it, but it's not gonna come to that, so don't worry about it. But we see as he leaves talking to Logan that he makes a phone call. He's trying to make an appointment. I'm assuming he's trying to get an attorney because he's basically going to be in this for himself. And if you look at the promo art for Succession Season 3, you see that it's a split between Kendall and Logan. And we see that Tom is actually on Kendall's side with Greg. So I think that Tom is actually going to end up jumping ship. He's going to go to Kendall's team. I just don't know what that's going to look like, but he is trying to get representation. But that's when he gets the phone call from Greg essentially snitching. Snitches get stitches, Greg. That's why you going through this trauma right now. That's why you stressed out, because you out here snitching in these streets. He basically tells Tom about what is happening, how essentially how Kendall is trying to come into the office. So there's not a ton that happens with Roman this episode. He gives us some funny jokes as he's asking everyone about their headspace. But we do get a little bit of a deeper look into the dysfunctional relationship between Roman and Logan, as, essentially they're trying to do this town hall. They're trying to get Shiv and Roman to talk about all these good times that they had with their father, which basically never happened because their daddy is raggedy. He never spent time with his kids. And so he tells them about this whole fly fishing trip to Montana that he had with his dad. That's a story that he could talk about. But we see later in the episode when Logan asks him like, Bish, I don't remember taking you to no fly fishing trip. He was like, yeah, it was actually Connor and it wasn't you. And so essentially, Roman is just going to do whatever he's going to do for his raggedy daddy, no matter how many ways that Logan passes him up for every single promotion. We see that he gave Shiv the president role in order to spy on Jerry, even though that was Roman's job previously before. But I'm just going to pray for them because you deserve a better father figure than what you have. I just need somebody to hug these kids. But let's talk about Shiv, because this is really Shiv and Logan's episode, delving deep into their relationship. But before all of this, we see that they're having this strategy meeting, and this is when Roman's doing this joke of asking everyone, how is their headspace? And then we see that Logan this episode is being very rude to Jerry. So Jerry is the acting CEO now. And essentially, she was put in place by Logan, but Logan is just being an ass to Jerry the entire episode. She's trying to help him, trying to tell him to cooperate, but he's just not having any of it. When she's giving him advice, he's basically acting like he's jacking off, pushing her to the side, and essentially, we see that they're pitching this idea for this town hall. And this is to address all of the allegations that are happening against Waystar. All of the employees are saying that they're embarrassed, they're ashamed to tell people where they work at. And so essentially they come up with this slogan basically saying, we get it. And then I was like, so y'all are covering up like sexual harassment for years, and your slogan that you come up is, we get it. Even Shiv makes fun of this, but we see that Shiv is basically giving all of this advice, and it's kind of making Roman look like, hold on, like what is actually happening right now? But they're interrupted because his secretary comes in and basically saying, hey, the government is on the phone. They're talking about a subpoena for Waystar. What should I tell him? And he basically says, tell them to F off. And this is when Jerry is just like, sir, you have to cooperate. Like, you cannot keep doing this, or it's just going to get worse. She tells him like, hey, you need to play ball. He said, hell to the no. I don't care what you got to say, boo-boo. You might be CEO, but I'm the puppet master here, pulling everybody's strings, and we're basically not doing that. So we see that they go back to this idea of the town hall. They want Shiv to be the one to speak. She's the president, but Shiv doesn't want to do it. So they basically bully Roman into actually speaking at the town hall, talking about how much he loves his dad. We see that later in the episode when he's trying to do the prep work and he's asking him about stories, he can't give him anything because they don't have a good relationship. Logan doesn't have a good relationship with any of his children. But they send Shiv to the charity event that I spoke about, and we actually got to see her ex little boo thing, Nate. He talking smack to her. I guess they, things still are not good between them since she chose to marry Tom. But we see she goes back home to report to her dad what has actually happened at the event. And they have a very weird conversation. So he asked her like, hey, did you see Kendall? She said, yes, I saw him. I spoke to him. And then, he was like, I'm just getting worried because every time I see you out, you out with the press. But I don't see you trying to like ride or die for me. I don't see you trying to be up here and, say like, hey, I stand with my father. And so he was like, at the end of the day, like, if you're not defending me in the press, like, do you not love me? Do you not trust me? And I was like, hell no, she don't trust you. And you don't love your kids. But she basically says like, hey, I really need you to tell me like, how bad is this? Did you know what was going on? He was just like, hey, there may be a couple of bad apples. What company doesn't have a couple of bad apples? But I promise you that there's nothing on paper that is going to make you ashamed for me to be your father. And so it seems like they kind of get in a good headspace. I'm just gonna go with headspace because Kendall started the whole thing. But you can tell that she knows that her dad isn't telling her everything, that he's holding some things back. But he says, the less that I'm telling you, I'm trying to keep you clean. I'm trying to keep you out of this. And so essentially, Shiv just takes him for his word. She goes home, and this is when she has a conversation with Tom. However, we see in the midst of all of this that Logan he sees at the White House aide, she's speaking on one of the TV shows, and so he goes to have a conversation with her to basically assess like, hey, what is the president saying about all of this is happening? And she was like, hey, the president cares about his polling numbers. This doesn't make him look good. Also, too, your raggedy network been talking mad smack about him in the press. I don't appreciate that either. He was like, well, look, I'm not asking for no help for you. And I was like, well, bitch, that's the White House. You should. Y'all buddies, y'all chummy. So essentially, she was just like, look, if you can just tell them to chill out on what they're talking about, don't be disrespecting the president on your network. He says he can work on that, but he just says, like, I don't want anything from you. But all I want is to know if I decide to play hardball that you're not going to get involved. And so essentially they come to this agreement, and essentially we have the town hall. And the most disrespectful thing, Kendall was so disrespectful. And essentially when Shiv is giving her speech as she's trying to address the sexual harassment allegations at the stakeholders meeting, there's music starts. And I was like, wait a minute, I know this ain't what I think it is. Kendall puts these speakers all over the building where the town hall is taking place, like on all the floors. This is essentially probably what he sent security to do. He had them play a song called Rape by Nirvana, literally, as she's trying to address the sexual assault claims against the company. He puts on a song called Rape by Nirvana. I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I did start laughing. I know, Lord, please, I am only human, okay? Please just work on my pity and my heart. I did laugh. Don't act like y'all were laughing. I was like, I can't even believe that Kendall did this. And so Shiv just like, she chokes, she gets off stage. Logan looking like, these raggedy ass kids, why did I even have kids in the first place? She goes to Kendall's office, he's not there, but we see all these boxes of speakers. I personally think Kendall did it. I don't think Logan even knows to go find Nirvana's on-call rate to do all of this. And so essentially, Shiv is pissed. She spits in his journal. She leaves. This is when she writes this scathing statement against Kendall, sends it out to the press. She tried to get Connor and Roman to sign this as well. And they were like, baby, you took this too far. This is way too far. Like, this is still our brother at the end of the day. He got kids. Like, I'm not signing this. Connor basically said, you can suck my dicky dick. That's what he told his sister. I don't talk to my siblings like this, but that's how they talk to each other. And so essentially, we see at the end of the episode that Jerry walks in. She says that the FBI is downstairs. They have gotten a subpoena for Waystar. We see it blasted all over the news. Shiv at home looking shook. Kendall crying to himself, looking shook in the computer room where he's hiding. Everybody else in the office looking shook. I'm sitting up here looking shook. And then the episode just goes off. And I was like, damn, like, y'all, I'm going to pray for y'all. Y'all going to need that prayer. I hope y'all praying, because it looked like somebody finna go down. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I will say this episode kind of got off to a slow start. As we get to know a little bit deeper about what's actually happening towards the last, 30 to 20 minutes of the episode, things pick up a little bit more. But I don't know what's going to happen now. But all I can say is Succession, they got my attention. I'm going to keep watching. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about this week's episode? Do you agree that it started off a little slow until we just went bang, bang, wild, wild west when the FBI showed up and it hit the news? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. But that is my recap, my quick thoughts on this episode. I'm not team Logan, not team Kendall. I'm team Jerry, because as she predicted last week, she said that probably at the end of this, the whole family is not going to have the company. That I'm riding with Jerry. That's who I'm riding with right now. But those are my thoughts on Succession Season 3, Episode 3, The Disruption. As always, my name is Sharonda from Payroll Waste, and if you like what you saw today, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, share this video with your friends, and make sure you hit that notification bell. And I love you guys 3000, and until I see you again,